We're still waiting on 2 more members. However, just want to let the committee, we are going live streaming to YouTube to let you know.
Corey, do you want us on video or not for this call?
I don't think it's necessary other than for the 4 committee members, Ben, Molly, Mike, Robert, and I maybe.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mr. Lawson? Mr. Sturbins?
Yes.
Oh, Mark, wonderful. All right, thank you. I will identify you. Will we have video with you today or just audio?
Just audio.
Wonderful, thank you. We are still waiting on, I think we have, Mr. Lawson? Mr. Lawson, do we have you on the call?
Mr. Lawson is calling me right now. Hang on.
Okay. We have a participant in the lineup that reads EJ's phone. I'm unsure who that member might be. Can you
Hi,
either
Corey.
identify?
It's Eric.
Yes.
It's Erica Olson. That's my phone.
Oh, Erica, thank you so much. Wow. Okay. Erica.
Corey, Mr.
Wonderful.
Lawson is calling in right now.
Thank you. I've got that calling in.
You got a Raiders fan?
All right, Mr. Lawson, are you on with us?
I am. Since I had to use my phone, I don't have my agenda, but I think we start with a roll call, don't we?
We do. Yes, may I take a roll call, please? Mr. Lawson,
Here.
Mr. Sturbins,
Here.
Mr. Chapman,
Here.
Mr. Kornstein.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I don't have my agenda in front of me, but hold on, I can get it right here. But I believe we're looking for approval of the meeting minutes.
Actually, Ben Kennedy here. It's public comment first.
Oh, do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
We have no public comment at this time.
Okay. There's my agenda. Thank you. Approval of the Finance Committee meeting agenda. I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make
This
the
is Mark.
motion.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Mr. Kornstein, seconded by Mr. Sturbins. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of the 2020 Finance Committee meeting minutes. Any additions, corrections, deletions? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll
This is
make
Mark.
it.
I'll make- Oh.
I'll
Go
let
ahead.
Mark make the motion. And Mr.
I'll second.
will have the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And on to E1, presentations. Potential revisions to the RSCVA contingency operations plan review, additional cost-cutting measures, possible budget revisions for fiscal year 2020 through 2021 for the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority. Who is going to take this one?
I will, Mr. Lawson. This is Jennifer Cunningham. I'd like to start out with the latest information that we have on the CARES Act and the PPP as it relates to the RSCVA. It was disappointing that Congress did not expand eligibility in the current CARES Act enhancement bill. Last week, there was an effort on behalf of the congressional delegation to get this key provision included in future relief legislation. What we as a Bureau have done, we've joined the advocacy efforts in order to be considered in another round in the CARES Act. U.S. Travel is working to ensure that quasi-governmental entities such as the RSCVA and other destination marketing organizations are eligible for federal support. And I just want to assure the committee that as a team, we're all watching this very closely. Next slide. Proposed staff reductions. I'd like the committee to know that we have prepared to do a massive restructuring of the RSCVA in response to COVID-19. As everyone's aware, as the weeks have gone by, things have gotten more severe. The reorganization that we are proposing involves every single employee at the RSCVA, and it amounts to a reduction of the full-time equivalency reduction of full-time equivalency by 50%. So for first, number one, we're proposing a 45% staff furlough, which includes not filling 5 vacant positions. We currently have 55 positions and 25 of these would be furloughed, which would result in remaining staff of 30 people. Number two, for the remaining staff, there would be a 10% pay cut. And number three, we are also proposing a volunteer retirement incentive to stimulate additional payroll reductions. Therefore, our proposal is employees with 15 years of service or more at the RSCVA would be able to take advantage of this incentive, which would amount to 10% of their salary. Again, those that choose to take the voluntary retirement would be in addition to the furloughs that you see on our slide right now. Last week, Mr. Chisel and I met with Michael Day from ASM to review every single employee on their payroll. And as a result, they have made some additional reductions to their staff. Right now, ASM has, they have 153 employees that have either been furloughed, are on a leave of absence, or vacant positions that will not be refilled. This represents a reduction of 80% of their workforce. They only have 14 people on their payroll, and any and all other active employees are right now working at the Reno Event Center, and their time is being billed to emergency service. Mr. Chisel and I continue to work with ASM to reduce every possible expense in addition to their payroll as well. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Chisel to give an update on the stabilization fund that we discussed at the last committee meeting. Thank you.
Yes, this is just a quick update on the potential option of freeing up some cash reserves that we had. The RSCVA currently has 4 series of bonds outstanding, all of which reflect the convention center expansion back in 2000. The current yearly bond payments for all bonds is approximately $8.8 million or $750,000 a month. When the bonds were issued in 1999, the bonds were issued through the county, through Washoe County. And at the time, Washoe County required the RSCVA to establish a stabilization fund of $4.6 million as a safeguard for the payment of the bonds. These funds have been held in trust with Zions Bank since that time. We have begun discussions with Zions or with Washoe County and Bond Council to determine if they are amenable to changing the requirements to allow the RSCVA to use these funds to make the additional bond payments in the coming fiscal year, thereby freeing up cash for operating. The county has requested a formal written request to reflect the need to dip into these funds, but as you will see in the current cash flow that we're going to be showing, it is not highly likely that we will need it. They have also requested additional information, and it is the intent of staff to proceed with a formal written request nonetheless for potential future need to cover the absorption of outstanding debt. Next slide. And next, financial standing through December. I wanted to highlight some key highlights about the forecast and financial standing that I want to bring to everyone's attention. As we continue to adjust and refine the forecast each week, there is changes. We are taking a very conservative approach to our revenue projections. I want to emphasize that. We are very conservative in our revenue projections. In this forecast, the RSCVA revenue forecast was developed based on discussions with the properties in the area. Assumptions used for revenue, including the cash room night occupancy being less than 20% for the next 11 months, and ADR will see a 25% reduction overall. Again, very conservative compared to what we've been hearing from the properties. For expenditures, there is the reduction in full-time staff equivalents as we talked about. As we've talked before, capital projects are canceled. We have maintained an overall expense reduction of $7.8 million for the next 4 months of this fiscal year. As Jennifer Cunningham spoke, ASM is operating the facilities on a skeleton crew, and we are set to maintain a $1.5 million cash reserve as we go through this. I'd also like to highlight that we are currently working on the fiscal year 2021 budget, and we'll be presenting it to our finance committee, yourselves, in early May, with a full board presentation on May 28th. And because of this, our current forecast only goes through December but we will have a full forecast for next fiscal year in the coming weeks. Next slide. This slide summarizes the cash flow for the RSCVA to December 2020. In the past, we had several cash flow scenarios there. We are presenting this one, the most conservative scenario, scenario F. As you can tell, the numbers are looking better than from prior scenario Fs, due in part to March numbers proving to be better than what was projected. Being the pessimist that I am, I guess I had a decline of 70% in revenues while it was only 53% for March. In addition, this takes into consideration the additional payroll reductions and other additional miscellaneous operating savings that we continue to seek. Based on the very conservative revenue forecasts and the proposed reductions by staff, the RSCVA will have a positive cash balance through the remainder of the calendar year. This ends our staff presentation, and I bring it back to the committee for discussion.
Okay, any questions from the committee?
Yeah, this is Mark. I got a quick question. So in your forecast here, Robert, did you have any luck being able to get a hiatus on the bond payments? Maybe I missed that.
Well, we sought the stabilization. The 2011s, which are have about $19 million outstanding, and for which the next bond payment will be for them of next fiscal year is about $5.5 million. Our bond advisor is looking to see how widely distributed those bonds are. They're fairly widely distributed, and we need at least 65% of bondholders to assent to any forbearance. And so we're trying that, but we haven't made much headway. It's going to be a longer slow to get through that because of the widely distributed bonds. As you may recall, we refinanced a number of the 2011 bonds last year for salary saving or bond savings, and the 2019 A's and B's really don't have much principal in the first 4 years. They were wrapped around the 2011s, and the 1999 cabs are paid off July 1st, and a cab would be very difficult to get a forbearance on. So we're looking at the 2011s, but we haven't made much progress at this time.
So that this forecast here includes making those payments then?
Yes, it does. Continues to make the approximately $750,000 a month payments into the trust.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Larson, may I ask a question?
Please.
For the record, Andy Chapman. Two questions, Robert. On the cash reserves of 1.5 million, that's kind of a new line item that we haven't seen in these scenarios. Can you speak a little bit to that, how you came to that, and where is that from? And then I have a follow-up question as well.
Yeah, we kind of had talked about it before because we really had $13.5 million of cash, but we're only showing what we had available.
Okay.
The 1.5 million is somewhat subjective, but it equates to about 3.5 weeks of operating cash. And the idea is that not all our revenues come in at the same rate as your expenditures. So you really can never have zero cash. So we feel it is appropriate to keep at least $1.5 million cash as your ending balance to make your payments as you go through the month. So that's why it's there.
I'm going to
It's never highlighted. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to, Andy, and to further elaborate, in 2015, when we sat down with the board of directors and had our retreat and pulled together the 5-year strategic plan, Mr. Lawson will remember, we started discussing policies that we wanted to put into place should the RSCVA ever find itself in an economic downturn and having to have rainy day funds. And this is a result of that. That was just a policy that was decided by the board at that time.
Okay. Thank you. And then my other question at this point is, where in the March through December do you return to funding marketing? And when and at what level is that? Because obviously as revenues start returning, there's going to be opportunities to get back out into the marketplace. And where do we see that in your net revenue less expenses line item? I mean, when is it projected?
This is Robert Chisel again for the record. This projection is a very conservative projection showing that we continue to have very low occupancy rates, meaning this is a worst case scenario where we don't have that recovery coming. So if the recovery comes, that will be additional revenue that would be directed to sales and marketing.
So to confirm, this scenario here really still has RSCVA dark from marketing and sales efforts. Well, sales efforts might be a little different, but on the marketing side.
A fairly minimal.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Andy, Mr. Chapman, it like Robert was just saying, it is minimal, but it ramps up, and I believe we're looking at for July, we're working on the budget right now, but July through June of fiscal year 2021, couple $1 million in marketing, which will be augmented as occupancy comes up. That again is a worst case scenario. We are ready to pull the trigger when we're able to get out there and the travel ban lifts. However, most of our media will be digital, just to be as efficient and stretch our dollars as much as we can. So I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me that breaks down the marketing spend. Again, it just ramps up.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Kornstein?
Not really. The only clarification I would have is the voluntary retirement that you referenced, Jennifer. Those are not, you don't have anybody there yet. So those would be additive numbers, correct?
That would be correct. Yes.
Okay. So, I think we've kind of beaten this quite a bit over the last several phone calls. And I'm personally satisfied that management's made strong efforts to skinny down the operation to reflect the challenges of the COVID-19 situation. So I'd like to at least put forward the idea that the Finance Committee approves this so that management can implement it as soon as possible. I don't, personally see the need to wait another week for a board meeting when I think we've really scrubbed this pretty strongly. And I'd rather see us save the money over the following week or, whatever it is, and not burden the board call next week with this topic. I think we could review it with them. I think they should understand it, but I think we have the authority to do that. So I'm asking you, Ed, as chair, if you're comfortable with that. And Ben, if I think we have that authority. So there are really two questions. One, do we have the authority? And secondly, are people comfortable moving on this today?
And yes, we do have the authority. And yes, we will present it to the board next week, whatever we decide. But I'm curious, I want to hear from Mark and Andy.
So this is Mark, Mr. Chairman. I got just a clarification. I agree with Mr. Cornerstein. I think we got to the point that we needed to get to, and I appreciate staff working hard to get here. I know it wasn't easy decisions, but I think it's will be better for the firm in the long run. Was there any consideration to the people that are going on furlough, if we will pay them anytime in the future, like 2 weeks or anything like that? Is there anything in that of that nature in this forecast?
No, there is not. We will bring them back as business levels dictate. And that's another reason why we're having our bi-weekly finance committee meeting to continue to check in with the finance committee on that.
So this would be an automatic, you're here today, gone tomorrow, and then there's no consideration for any type of, severance is a bad term because we intend to bring them all back, but any type of extended pay or one-time pay for a temporary. Is that something we want to consider, I guess, to the rest of the committee?
This is Robert Chisholm. Molly, maybe you could address what the legal requirements we have for the furlough.
Right, so these are contemplated to be temporary furloughs until such time as these employees can be brought back. If at any time that it is determined that positions actually need to be eliminated and these individuals would be actually laid off, there are policies in place that the RSCVA already has in place that would dictate certain severance payments to be paid to employees who are laid off and positions are eliminated. The executive staff did not make the decision to eliminate positions. They wanted to just do a temporary furlough at this point and then bring people back. So those policies did not kick in.
I have a follow-up to that. In addition to the question of compensation, what about benefits? Are we allowing people to keep benefits for some period? Because that's usually, at least in my experience, that's a really high priority item, especially given we're dealing, with a health crisis right now.
Yes. Jennifer, can you state what your plan was on how long you would, was it for the entire time of the furlough that you were maintaining benefits for the employees?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's another reason why this is just a furlough as opposed to a position elimination layoff. These employees, though, would be entitled to, in the furlough position under the current Nevada state law, they are entitled to unemployment and can file for unemployment, including the additional federal stimulus package under the CARES Act, the additional $600 per week.
So to be clear, Jennifer, this is Mark Sturvins again. They have insurance benefits the entire time they're on leave.
Yes, that would be correct. Robert, you.
This is Robert Chisholm. Yeah, the normal requirement is 3 months, but because of the COVID, the insurance company has extended the ability for somebody to be on furlough to 4 months. And I would anticipate with the continuation of COVID, that would get continued as we go along. But at this time, it's at least 4 months of health insurance coverage. And I'd also like to state that the furloughs were going to take place at the beginning of the next pay period, as what I believed our understanding was, Jennifer Cunningham.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And we are obligated with some employees by giving a certain notice by law before they are furloughed.
When is that pay period?
The pay period goes through looks like it's the 3rd of May. So basically May 1st, next week.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Yes, I've got one, Andy Chapman for the record. Again, just to clarify, so we're talking about 30 furloughed positions. I would imagine they would align with somewhat of our original or earlier conversations based on departmental conversations. So I guess that's one question to confirm. I think I see Jennifer shaking her head yes, so that's good. Their health benefits continue. That's the second point I want to clarify. The third, that this cash flow scenario is built on a scenario F, which was a probably ultra, well, I won't call it ultra conservative, but the most conservative revenue rebound that we had been talking about. It also includes from a July through June fiscal year coming up, approximately $2 million in marketing funds. which will be augmented with increased revenues if the worst case scenario or this conservative scenario is improved upon. Is that all correct?
This is Jennifer Cunningham. Andy, the number of positions that are being furloughed is 25.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, 25. We leave in 30 total.
Yes. And
Thank you.
Molly, I have a question for you because this will not be approved until the board meeting on April 30th. I believe we would like to notice the employees and have the furloughs effective at the next pay period. Is that correct? So that would be May 14th,
Oh, no.
something like that?
I thought we were saying that we have the authority, and I raised the idea that we're going to approve this today. We shouldn't go another
That was
2
my-
weeks.
I misunderstood
I think we're
Mr.
gonna
Lawson.
Yeah, I think we're
Yeah,
gonna, I hope we're
okay,
gonna
my apologies.
agree to do that today. There's no reason to wait. And then especially if we have to wait till the middle of May, we're just burning money that really doesn't need to be, at least in my opinion, put up. in-
Absolutely. I misunderstood Mr. Lawson's direction. Thank you.
So now I just have one question then. So we've already approved at the board that the executive staff's taken a 25% decrease. We've approved the raise for Jennifer and then the 25% decrease. Are you saying then that across the board, executive staff will just take a 10% instead of a 25% decrease?
What we are saying, what this proposal is that all remaining staff will take a 10% decrease in pay.
Including the executive staff
Absolutely.
from pre 25% or in addition to the 25%? Because right now you've already taken at 25%, at least you should have been, because that's what we voted on last meeting.
Molly or Ben, do you guys have clarification on that?
Yeah, this is Ben Kennedy. My recollection from the last meeting is the board approved the plan as presented at that board meeting, subject to further review and revision by finance. So I think the 25%, short answer, I think the 25% got approved at the board meeting, subject to being reviewed at the finance committee. And I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if it was at the board meeting or the finance committee where it was raised that maybe 25% was aggressive and it could be less.
It was at the board meeting. Okay, so what are you telling me then? We haven't taken a 25% decrease by the executive staff?
No, we have not.
Okay.
And again, Andy Chapman, I think that was my understanding that directive got then sent to this committee pending conversations with Ann Silver as well as the board member that was helping you guys initiate some of these conversations. So that was my understanding that those changes or cuts, as we could call them, were pending the final outcomes of this conversation.
That's
So
not my question.
I couldn't hear what the last person said.
That's not my recollection. My recollection was it was passed by the entire board. That was presented by the executive staff. And we gave Jennifer a raise, and then we decreased the executive staff 25%. That was what we voted on. And that the coming back to this committee was to find ways to save more cash. Do we have the minutes? Can we get the minutes?
Ben, thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Okay. I will read the motion from the board meeting on the 3rd. The motion was member Andy Chapman made a motion to appoint Jennifer Cunningham as interim president and CEO. Her duties as such, keeping and maintaining day-to-day operations, and that the CEO would oversee escalating outside the duties to the board chairman. It said any increase in pay would be addressed in agenda item F. Let me continue down to that item. Let me see. I apologize. I didn't know we would be addressing this. Give me one moment, please. In the motion, right before Mr. Chapman makes the motion, and it is seconded by Nat Caraselli, it reads, Jennifer Chapman Cunningham announced that it is they are recommending a 25% pay cut for executive staff as part of the contingency plan in that item F1, which was discussed at the Finance Committee meeting. Does that answer the question or no?
So the motion was for that motion? What was the motion?
I have to go back. I apologize. I don't have it right in front of me. I can go back and find it.
This is Mark, but I think the question really, Ed, is do we expect the executive staff to take a 25 or 35% cut in pay, which I would recommend if we've already agreed that they would take a 25% cut in pay, it would be 25% for the executive staff and then 10% for the remaining staff members would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wouldn't even be comfortable suggesting that it go up to 35%. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to clarify. But because I was sure that we voted to already implement the cuts at that meeting.
I also think, just by the by, for what it's worth, it's sort of typical for executive staff who makes more money to take a higher percentage than everybody else, to literally the lowest person, because obviously 10% on different numbers has a more meaningful impact. I'm not here to take money away from anybody. I'm just suggesting it's pretty typical that it wouldn't be an across the board similar percentage, putting aside what had already been voted on at the board, which I think is important to clarify. So just give that perspective.
Jennifer Cunningham, if I may speak while Corey's looking at that. I agree with Mr. Kornstein in that when Las Vegas last week did their discussion on furloughs and pay cuts, Steve Hill took 10% with, I believe, the executive staff, and everybody else was around 4, 5, 6%. So regardless if we're at 25 or whatever percentage, I think it's important. I would really recommend that the other employees outside executive have a less of a pay cut for their salaries.
Yeah, I'm trying to clarify the executive staff, because I recall it as that we accepted that as the board, and that was what was voted on. And if I'm wrong, I will be happy to admit I'm wrong, because I've been wrong maybe an hour ago.
Yeah, it's Ben Kennedy, if I can jump in here. I just want to clarify that for the record that the minutes Corey is looking at right now, those are not official minutes. They haven't been approved. I would imagine between now and the board meeting, I think as part of Corey's usual process, that she'll go through and look at her notes and her minutes and watch and listen to the video. So in fairness to her, I think we're catching her off guard, and we don't have approved minutes from the last meeting. I would say my recollection, without anything in front of me, is the same as yours, that the board voted to approve the proposal, but it was made clear that it was subject to, and I think Mr. Kornstein even added, not just subject to, but it definitely would be revised by the Finance Committee. So it sounds to me we've got maybe a little bit of misunderstanding by staff with those remarks, thinking that this was still sort of in flux and would be finalized by this committee. So I think the committee just needs to decide what direction it wants to take and go forward from there. That'd be, but.
Okay,
With that, again, if I could weigh in, Andy Chapman for the record, if in fact this is still in some kind of a limbo and a misunderstanding, I would be at the position that I think 25% is pretty heavy-handed. That's a pretty major hit. Now, I understand that the organization needs to be able to move forward, and I assume, Robert, that the scenario you have in front of us, this worst case scenario, includes the 10% reduction, not the 25 for executive staff.
This is Robert Chisel. That is correct.
So again, and not having board meeting minutes approved yet and not having the ability to really confirm that, I was under the understanding that that 25% was going to be part of the overall conversation with this committee, as it has been on a couple of our different calls, as we've looked at the different proposals coming forward. Because I think also at that call, at the board meeting, we didn't have any conversations about the number of furlough employees that we are having now. So I would just, for the record, say that I think that 25% is a little heavy-handed.
okay. I know at several casinos over a certain dollar amount, they're taking 50% cuts. So I think 25 is reasonable, but my point is to clarify this, that I thought we already voted on it, and I'm pretty sure we did. All right, so I'll take Ben's suggestion and we'll say, I'll look for a motion and let you guys just decide what you want to do from here, because you're right, it isn't fair to Corey because they haven't been accepted and they haven't been put into a format for us to see who made a motion, what the exact words were, because that matters also, in that you make a motion as a board member that it gets carried out, and I'm a little perplexed on that. So anybody want to do a motion and let's get this underway?
I'll take a stab at one. I would like to motion that we, as the committee, accept the proposals by staff on the cash flow scenarios as submitted today, including a 10% salary reduction for executive and managerial staff, and a 5% for kind of the support staff that is underneath in support of the structure of the organization.
Okay.
The only issue with that, Andy, is then you're actually having to change this cash flow. We're going to have less cash because you've taken whatever the number, I don't even know how many people are in the executive staff, but everybody else, you've cut their pay down to 5% from 10%. So we're actually reducing the amount of cash in the cash statement. I personally think we should go the other way. I think it should be 10% for the staff, let's call it. And in the spirit of just getting to the conclusion, I'd suggest 15%. So there's a differentiation with the executive staff, because I do think the executive staff has to take leadership and show that they're taking a bigger bite, even though the actual dollars will be much less significant than it will to the lowest group of employees. So that would be the only adjustment I would suggest, because I don't want to see us have less cash than this cash flow statement.
Now, Andy's made a motion. Are you willing to amend your motion to that, Andy, or do you want to look for a second?
I think I would look for a second right now, and then if there isn't one, we can certainly have other conversations. As I look at the LVCVA and things that they have done, I think it is fairly in line with that. And yet, Mr. Corstein, I know it does reduce some of that revenue, but again, this is a conservative number. I think to begin with. Plus, I think the impacts on that lower end salary wise will be less. So.
Okay, so I'm still looking for a second to Mr. Chapman's motion. And because it's technology, I'm giving you some extra time. So I'm going to say then that Mr. Chapman's motion dies for lack of a second. You want to take a stab at a motion then, Mr. Kornstein?
Well, if I could just piggyback on Andy's motion, which I agreed with, and just change the numbers to 10% for the staff and 15% for the executive staff, that would be my motion.
This is Mark, I'll second.
Okay, I got a first and a second. Any further discussion? All those,
Can I just
go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier, but I just want to be clear that this is this committee is approving this action today. This is not a recommendation to the board, but this is to be approved and put into effect as of today. And I also just want to make sure we're clear on who's executive staff and staff subject to the 10 and 15%.
Well, given that I made the motion, I'll make it, I'll be clear. Yes, this is to approve, not to recommend. We will inform the board, but we have the authority. So, and I think timing is important. As far as who's on the executive staff, I think that's Jennifer's question to answer.
There's two ways to look at it. Executive staff, you have Robert Chisel, myself, Mike Larraguetta. And then we also could, if you wanted, go down to directors and above, or just vice presidents and above. There's your choice.
So Jennifer, I thought the people that attend, this is Mark, by the way, the monthly meeting was considered the executive staff. The one, when I say attend, the ones at the at the table.
Yes.
Normally.
So that's your determination, whether it's vice presidents and above or directors and above. Directors and above are who attend the board meetings.
I think that was like 5 people or 7 people, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, what is the number?
Let's see. Robert, Art, Mike, Jennifer, Esther, and Art, and Sherry. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is where we are, unless I'm forgetting somebody. Robert, Mike, anyone? I think it's 7.
I think you're correct.
So, Mr. Kornstein, you want to clarify that on your motion? You want to take that as a definition of executive staff as those 7 people?
Yeah, I will amend the motion to say that executive staff constitutes the 7 people, the 7 positions that Jennifer outlined.
And Mr. Sturbins, do you want to amend your second?
I'll amend my second to match what Mr. Kornstein just said.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I just have one other comment. Again, Andy Chapman for the record. I know that given the board meeting last month and the directive that gives this committee the authorization, I would just point out that we are talking about a 45% reduction of personnel staff for this organization. And in doing so, with basically 4 members of the board. I'm not exactly sure if it would have been contemplated at the time of the board that this type of cuts could be made, but I certainly support moving forward with what we're doing. But I would just like to put that in the record that this is a pretty major change in the organization, and is that one that the full board should have an ability to weigh in on, given that we have a week to go before that meeting.
Okay. Any further discussion?
If I could speak to that, it's Ben Kennedy, just to be clear. I think there's practical consideration of if you want the board to review and approve this, but legally, per the last meeting, this committee does have the authority to take this action. I just want to make sure that's clear in the record.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. You're gonna have to help me out with the agenda, Ben. What do we have? Comments from the committee?
Correct. Committee comments for future meetings.
There any comments for future meetings from the committee? Hey, there you guys are.
Wow.
A handsome group. All right, so then I believe it's public comment, Ben?
Correct.
Do you have any public comment?
There's no public comment at this time.
Okay, and I think we go from there to adjournment, right?
That's right.
Thank you very much, everybody. That's a tough decision. Thank you for doing your homework. Thank you for, this is not fun. I'm going through it right now at the city of Sparks. It's just not fun at all to go through this exercise when we lost 40% of our staff just 10 years ago. And it's now these same people that we haven't been able to build back up, ask them to do more with less. And now we have to do that at the city also. It's no fun. I know it's no fun, and no one takes any joy in all this. So thank you for your hard work.
Yeah, amen. I agree with that. Thank you so much, and stay safe.
Yeah, very well said. Hang in there, guys.
Thanks
All
all.
right, guys.
Take care.
Bye.